Time on the Edge 105 FM. It is 5:32.
You're listening to The Edge 105.1 and 105.3 FM. Your life, your music. The Edge!
The Supreme Court imposed a massive blow to the government just under 2 weeks ago when it ordered an injunction stopping police officers from issuing fixed penalties for road traffic offences in excess of those imposed under the 1938 road traffic law. This is significant because police officers have been issuing tickets in excess of such limits for road traffic offences since 2006, and persons have been summoned to court to pay such fines. Very swiftly after the injunction was imposed, Parliament sought to remedy the problem with an amendment to the law last Friday. So, what does all of this mean for motorists and police officers? Find out now in our conversation with Nickardo Lawson, attorney at law at DunnCox. Good afternoon, Nickardo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, good afternoon, Dion. Thank you so much for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.
So great. So just to bring it all together for persons who may not be up to date, can you explain what has been happening with the recent road traffic law?
Sure. So, Dion, there's a very interesting case currently before the Supreme Court. A gentleman, Mr. Maurice Hussein. No, I really hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. If I'm not Mr. Hussein, forgive me. He filed a lawsuit against the government in July, seeking several orders from the court on the basis that his constitutional right to due process was breached. He says this because a police officer issued a speeding ticket to him in July this year, which imposed a penalty of $5,000 for allegedly breaching the 1938 road traffic law. He denied committing the offense. Importantly, he also says that further, when one reviews the 1938 law, Dion, it is it's lawful amendment. There's no fixed penalty. There's no such fixed penalty for speeding. Instead, he claims that it appears that the police officer issued the ticket to him under ministerial orders that were made in 2006 and 2007 under the provisional tax collection law, which sought to impose a fixed penalty of $5,000 for the offense. He says this is unlawful because under 1938 road traffic law, the fixed penalty was a major difference of $800. He also sought an injunction to prevent police officers from issuing similar tickets in the future and for permission to stand as representative for other persons in Jamaica who have been similarly ticketed since 2006. So that's what's happening right now.
All right. Thank you so very much for bringing us up to date.
Right.
But a couple more questions. So what are the ministerial orders then? And why has Mr. Housen said that the ticket that was imposed was unlawful?
All right. So generally, a ministerial order is essentially any directive issued by the minister under his or her legislative authority, which seeks to regulate any issue which falls within that ministry. But Mr. Hussein is basically saying that as of the date in July when the ticket was issued to him, fixed penalties for road traffic offences were listed under the appendix on the third schedule to the 1938 road traffic law, and that these penalties had not been increased by Parliament or by the Minister of Transport under the relevant section of that law. Instead, he says, as I had said, the increase was purportedly done under the ministerial orders made by the Minister of Finance under the tax law and not under the road traffic law. So such an increase, he says, is unlawful as the Minister of Finance has no power, he says, to increase the fines or penalties under the road traffic law. And also, importantly, the imposition of the $5,000 penalty was abusive and unfair because it was more severe than the law permitted at the time the offense was committed. So he's basically saying that, at the time for speeding, that type of speeding, the penalty was $800 and he was ticketed for $5,000. So he's saying that's abuse of his right to due process under the Constitution.
This is what a lot of persons are looking out for, Nickardo Lawson. Again, I'll tell you, attorney at law at DunnCox, as we look at the legal landscape. So let us ask on behalf of motorists. Motorists to whom the tickets were issued since 2006 under the ministerial orders in excess of those prescribed then by the 1938 law recover the excess that they paid on those tickets, can they?
Right, that's an interesting question, actually, and that's actually at the heart of Mr. Hossain's lawsuit. My answer is it would appear that where persons paid the increased penalty on the tickets, and that were issued since 2006, they, depending on the outcome of the lawsuit, may be able to recover the excess. However, perhaps where motorists were issued tickets under the road traffic law but failed to pay and were issued fines by the road traffic court, such persons may not be able to recover anything under Mr. Hossain's lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you've basically said that, but let me just ask you again for clarification. What is the state of the road traffic law regarding fixed penalties at present?
Right. So on November 5th, Parliament swiftly passed an amendment to the road traffic law, which amends the appendix and third schedule of the older law, the 1938 law, to actually increase the fixed penalties. So as of today, the penalties have been significantly increased by way of an amendment to the road traffic law as opposed to by way of ministerial orders. Right.
So if Mr. Hossain is correct, and all the related tickets for fixed penalties under the order since 2006 are illegal, can Parliament do anything to remedy the problem?
Yeah, generally, Parliament may impose the increased penalties retroactively by what is called a validation law. Now, a validation law is basically any law duly passed by Parliament that seeks to have retroactive effect, covering acts done in good faith in the past, but done without lawful authority. That means that Parliament could possibly pass laws to validate those tickets stated to have been issued under the 1938 law, but were issued unlawfully. So the argument would possibly be that those motorists, like Mr. Hossain, may not, if the validation law is passed, be able to recover the excess paid on the tickets, thereby saving the government millions in repayment expenditure to the public. Right.
And what is the status of Mr. Hossain's case?
Essentially, so on November 3rd, an injunction was issued by the court preventing further steps by police officers to issue tickets. But we know that an amendment has been passed by Parliament, and the case is now set for full trial in 2023. We have 2 years to wait to see what will happen with the actual case.
Well, thank you very much for giving us all this information and explaining how it affects us as motorists and by extension, of course, for police officers as well. Do you have any hashtag did you know moments that you can share with us before you leave?
Yeah, sure. I love a hashtag. What I'll say is that, to motorists listening, did you know that if the lawsuit is successful, that you may be able to go back to the government and say, listen, I want a refund or all the excess that I've paid, I want that money back. And I think that's significant for the government in terms of potential financial liability to the public.
Hashtag did you know? Keep all receipts always, eh?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, Nickardo Lawson, attorney at law at DunnCox, thank you so much for this week's edition of The Legal Landscape. And we're sure everybody's sitting on the edge of the seat. Can't wait to join us next week, same time, same place. My brother will have more information. Thank you
so much for having me. Bye.
Great, thank you. All right, there you have it. Another edition of The Legal Landscape. That's a wrap for this week. Oh boy, I tell you what one ticket can do, eh?